I'm absolutely thrilled to be doing this. We did have an online launch for Spinifex Press a month or two back. I know we have Renata and Susan from Spinifex here, and Renata will just say a few words after this about Spinifex. So I'm going to begin with a few words. I don't usually write things down, but I did write things down for the online launch. So I'm going to begin by telling you about, by giving you a bit of a flavour of what to expect from the book. I'm sure by now some of you have read it. I'd like to start by noting, I don't know if anyone else was aware of this, I only became aware of it a day or two ago, that today is actually 10/10. It's XX Day. Yeah. So it's very, very appropriate. So it's my very great pleasure to launch this book, which is, as you're probably aware, it's comprised of talks given by Sheila from 2011. Most of them actually were written in the past 5 years, and many of them are still available to view online. So you can read the chapter and then read the talk, and also for search on YouTube, and you can find Sheila. So the book opens with, the collection opens with Sheila's acceptance speech for her richly deserved Lifetime Achievement Award that was bestowed on her by the Spanish Association of Progressive Women. And then after that introductory talk, it's followed by 4 main sections: the nuts and bolts of male domination, the prostitution and reproductive technology industries, challenging gender identity politics, and lesbian feminist politics. So those are the 4 sections that the talks are grouped into. And we're going to talk about a couple of the specific talks following this. So my experience of reading the book was that it's a brilliant, and I have to say very readable collection. I think it's the perfect follow-up to Penile Imperialism, which was also published by Spinifex in 2022. In what we have come to expect from Sheila's work, it's extensive and fearless analysis of male domination. It picks up many of the themes of penile imperialism, expanding on them and offering further insights. Sheila not only offers a meticulous analysis of well-recognized systems of oppression, such as the sex industry, but she also boldly goes where perhaps if not no women, then very few of us have gone before. Whether, and we'll hear a little bit about that today, whether this is dissecting the horrors of nappy fetishism or diaper fetishism, you might know it as, yeah, not too pretty, exposing men's sexual violation of women in supposedly wholesome pursuits such as naturism, or simply noticing and analysing. This is, I do think, is brilliant observations of Sheila, noticing and analysing the significance of mundane everyday events. So she gives an anecdote about a young mother who is doing her grocery shopping, and then she ends up feeling obliged to humour this old man who's clearly boring, pouring on about something or other. And Sheila notices the expressions on the woman's face and how she, all of this kind of female, oiling the wheels so that he feels listened to, etc. So as Sheila says in the book, that this young woman is already doing 2 jobs. She's looking after a young child, she's doing the shopping, and then she's also having to do this labour of humouring this boring man. Sheila also notices things that, like, we cannot watch the evening news without engaging in the degradation of a woman, because unless we close our eyes, we are forced to witness female newsreaders wearing debilitating high-heeled fetish shoes. And she importantly points out that none of these things is inevitable or biologically determined, but rather socially constructed in the service of male domination and the male sex right. And I think her observations here, which we can see coming in a direct line from the consciousness-raising groups and the analysis of the women's liberation movement, I think it's a very necessary antidote to what I've certainly noticed is a retrograde tendency at the moment towards biological determinism. So Sheila, I would say, is this is a literary quote, I can't remember exactly where from. Sheila is a snapper up of unconsidered trifles. She notices how deeply male domination is embedded in the ordinary. She draws our attention to the ubiquity of women's long hair hanging down like curtains, to little girls wearing skirts that restrict their physical movement, to the high heels that I've mentioned, the facial contortions, all of these things. And she insists on their political significance, just as second wave feminists examined every aspect of their lives through the understanding that the personal is political. And I know there are plenty of women in this room who've definitely come up through that tradition of analysis. And I think what a deeply satisfying aspect of the book is the way in which that crucial insight of the personal is political it informs Sheila's analysis. So, if I had to sum up in just sort of three things that I really like about this book, they would be: one, the quality of the analysis; two, the writing style; and three, the great authority of the book. I'll just say something very briefly about each of those. I think the quality of the analysis is, well, it carries right the way through, but I think it's particularly exemplified in the first section. So where Sheila analyses these concepts which are generally seen to be kind of good things, like equality and a problem of free speech. I won't kind of go into that now, because otherwise I'll take up all the time. But I think Sheila's kind of very sort of surgical analysis of these ideas, of these concepts, and the problem that they are for women, I think it really goes way beyond most of the discourse that we see about them currently. I think in terms of the writing style, I think it really comes across that these pieces were written as talks. I think that really comes across because I know that Sheila wrote these talks because she considered the topics that she was writing about or speaking about to be urgent and pressing. And I think the writing style really conveys that urgency. It's wonderfully clear. It has a vivid, direct quality, which I have to say I found a pleasure to read, even when the subject matter is thoroughly grim. I think the book is exhilarating and galvanizing, and it is, I can assure you, never boring, because it burns with that conviction of someone speaking the truth. Finally, I think the book is authoritative because, as I say, I think Sheila's work provides a direct link to the women's liberation movement. Each piece is informed by decades of experience, knowledge, and expertise. And as I say, provides a direct link to the women's liberation movement and to the radical feminist analysis that flourished in the 1970s and 80s. And what I've seen, and I'm sure a lot of us have followed her work subsequent to that, her writing brings that analysis to bear on all the subsequent developments right up to the present day. And I think it exemplifies that Sheila's commitment to women through her scholarship and activism has been lifelong and unwavering. And I can really do no better than echo the words of Leah Keith: if women were a nation, Sheila Jeffreys would be our Joan of Arc. But before I hand over to Sheila and start asking her some questions, I also would like to say that I didn't mention on the online launch, but I've been thinking about a lot since. I think this book, like all of Sheila's work, is challenging. The talks, as I say, were written out with a sense of urgency. So I'd like us also to think about the challenge for us as readers in how we respond to that urgency and to that analysis. I think as we read them, the essays generate in us the same spirit in which they were written, that, as I say, they have this very galvanizing quality. So I don't think these books were meant to simply be read and enjoyed and then put back on the shelf and then we all just carry on with our lives. I think that this book, as with all of Sheila's books, does pose a challenge for each of us. And I think it's for each of us to think about, and maybe later I might even ask Sheila to talk about the impact that she would like this collection to have. So if I may, I'm going to finish with an anecdote. I know Sheila doesn't actually remember this, but I remember it quite clearly because it's just quite a big one. About probably best part of 15 years ago, Sheila was over 13 years ago, something like that. Sheila was over talking about her book Man's Dominion. And as I recall, she was at a social event. And as always, as I know is going to be the case over these next couple of days, women were coming up to Sheila and saying, very excited to meet Sheila, and saying, I love your work, and, very, very excited and enthusiastic. And I remember this one woman in particular came up to Sheila and said, Sheila, and I don't remember exactly which book it was. Maybe she just generally said, I love your work. And very, in sort of, kind of a bit gushy, really, I suppose. Saying, Sheila, I love your work. I think it's fantastic. And Sheila, maybe feeling a little bit fed up by this time, she turned around and said, and did it make you a lesbian? And the woman replied, having to acknowledge, well, actually, it hadn't. She was, I think, as I recall, I think maybe she was married, or she was living with someone, maybe had a baby. And Sheila had only one thing to say. Well, what was the point then? So I do think they do carry a challenge. I think we all recognise that challenge, and I think it's for us to think about what that challenge means for us, and maybe to talk about that with other women in groups. And I wouldn't be surprised if that is really something that's going to galvanise a new era of the women's liberation movement. So, on that note, I will hand over to Sheila. I will ask Sheila the first question about there's a chapter in the first section of the book, The Nuts and Bolts of Male Domination, which is titled So Hard to Talk About Sex. Why is it so hard to talk about sex? So Sheila, could you tell us a bit about what that book is about, what that talk is about, and why you wrote it?
Now, can I just say before I say anything, I'm so absolutely thrilled and delighted to see you all here. It's fantastic because I've had a most terrible week, leading up to this conference, just feeling enormously stressed because I'm sure everybody here knows by now, I'm banned from speaking because Philia doesn't like me and thinks I say rude things about them. So I've been talked to the headmistress of office, and at 77, that's kind of weird, That's the situation. So seeing you here, wonderful women, absolutely wonderful women. So I've had the most terrible week, and now all these wonderful, wonderful women. It's fantastic, and I'm not going to get to talk to everybody, and they're here from all over the world. I mean, it's fantastic. So that's all I want to say by introduction. So I didn't realise until quite recently that I'm often extremely rude. In the last couple of days, one woman I said, I was on a panel with in Canada, I said to her, why have you got high-heeled shoes on? And she gave up. And other women, apparently, I do say to you, why are you wearing lipstick? I mean, it's blunt, isn't it? I had no idea. Reflex. I have to say it. I was thought it quite nice.
It's radical feminist Tourette's.
So in terms of this talk, which is the first talk in the book, I'll just say why it's hard to talk about sex. And I wrote it because I was fed up with how long it was taking for people, even some feminists, many feminists, to understand that transgenderism was a sexual perversion. And it has taken a really, really long time. And there are still some, just one or two women who still seem to think there's an innate condition, or everybody who's, has got over that. Oh, thank goodness. But I do remember one feminist who's quite well known now. She has a sort of online magazine and all sorts. Having a conversation with me a few years ago and saying that there were some men who were just transgender, it was innate for them. And so I asked her, as I always do in this situation, why heterosexual middle-aged women do not transgender, and why women don't get excited by wearing men's knickers. She said to me, oh, that's a good question. obvious question. So I thought, my God, we still have to try and explain why talking about sex is crucial. Why talking about male sexuality is absolutely fundamental to the situation and fundamental to the situation we're in right now as women. So I thought it must be because why women didn't understand this. The great majority of women have never thought about male sexuality. Why is this? In fact, I think, and agreeing probably with Joe Bartosh as well, I think it's mainly because women don't know about pornography. They just don't. Yeah. The majority of women have never seen it. They know nothing about it. Why would they look at it? Particularly lesbians probably wouldn't understand what's in men's pornography. They have no idea of the huge networks that men have online and the things they talk about with each other and the pornography that they look at all the time. Women have no idea. They just go out getting the groceries and keeping their baby for a while, whatever it is they do. Right? But not having in their head what is the content of men's pornography. So I want sexuality to be talked about, male sexuality, because the exercise of male sexuality is so important. It's not foundational to the way men control and organize the use of women under male domination. I mean, all of the organization of the world, if you think about marriage and partnerships and what's recognized as any of those things, are about the penis entering the body of the woman. I mean, that's it, folks. That's it. Virginity is that the penis hasn't entered the body of the woman. Marriage is that the penis has entered the body of the woman, and so on and so on and so on. The whole thing is based on the penis entering a woman's body. And yet, there are people who don't think sex is political. I think that's absolutely incredible. Really incredible to me. So it's not just necessary to see the sexual basis of transgenderism, and the way that male violence is used to control where women go, what they can do, and so on. It's also necessary to understand how men's perversions are created, because they're really, really important. It's all very well for most women not having any idea of what they are or what's in the pornography, but it's absolutely crucial. I'm going to talk about naturism today, which most people have never thought of as having anything to do with the oppression of women, but it is. Why are women not wanting to look at it? I think it is because women don't know what's in the sex. And women have been persuaded that sex is about pleasure, individual pleasure. Come on, pull the other one. I mean, for goodness sake, what do you think is going on out there? Why doesn't the concept of virginity exist? Why doesn't the concept of virginity exist for lesbians? Come on, think about it. Why doesn't it? There's no conquest. There's not two different classes of person, and one enters the body of the other and then tells all their mates about it and gets lots of prestige. Sorry, it doesn't happen among lesbians. Right? So that mere fact tells you what male sexuality is about and the way male sexuality constructs all of it. It's never so straightforward. It's not mentioned. Lesbians never say to each other anything about virginity or why it's an absurd concept. And of course, it is an absurd concept. And one doesn't become used good, so it's conquered because she has a sexual relationship with a woman. It just happens. I mean, think about that. It just doesn't happen.
Hearing you back here.
Sorry. You're not hearing me so well. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, sorry, I'm sorry. I probably moved it a bit.
Sheila, keep the mic almost.
Keep it space.
Yes, sorry. Very sense, yes.
Hello. Maybe this one might be better.
So, it doesn't. Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe turn that
Maybe.
While she's good. Keep it almost yes to your lips.
I mustn't say too much actually because it's a little bit of time. And of course, transgenderism, which we're very concerned about, comes from the pornography. There's no question about that. I mean, the pornography creates it in the same way that the pornography creates paedophilia. Men don't suddenly imagine this on the side of a mountain. They have huge communities where they can, construct all these behaviors in each other and spread these behaviors between each other. So that's where they come from. Okay, so let's just think a bit about naturism. Sometimes called naturism, sometimes called nudism. And what the men are actually building their demands based on naturism, which is that the men must be able to show their penises absolutely everywhere, in front of children, in front of everybody, and so on and so on. Now, naturism is now a huge campaign. It's a rights campaign. They say that it's all right for men to do these things. They appear on Woman's Hour. A woman that appears on Woman's Hour saying it's absolutely marvelous. It's absolutely marvelous. They've got a huge campaign going. They want to change the law. You don't have to change the law. Really, make anything anywhere in the British Isles, and it's never an offence. Never, 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 unless it can be proven that they actually intended to upset. So the situation now is that there are naked bike rides, there are naked nights in museums and galleries, there's naked men everywhere. They get join organisations concerned about men. Actually, the men have two versions. They have scopophilia. They want to look at other men, and they have indecent exposure. They want to wave their penises at women, right? So men get very excited, huge amounts of satisfaction from naturism. Women try to go on a nude beach and find the men come and harass them. Yeah. It's not the same. And then there are other little problems, such as the fact that there are naturist families. Now get that one, right? And they have little groupings of naturists in their homes. They have other families, naturist families, and probably a single males all come and visit them. And I talked to a woman who was brought up with her daughter in one of these families, the WDI event, and she said it was horrendous. The sexual abuse and harassment, it was horrendous. They both left as soon as they could. I think 16. They were both out of there. So, and there's a lot of concern about this in the naturist, not in the naturist, yes, in the naturist community. If you look at some of their Facebook pages, you can see they're worrying, they're a bit edgy about the in the family stuff. But what do you think this means for? Paedophilia and so on. I better stop. I'm far, far, far too much to say. Don't stop me on any of the versions or we'll be here all night.
Thank you, Sheila. I must say that I remember when you gave that talk on naturism at the WDI conference a couple of years, a year or so back, wasn't it? And yeah, it's something that I have to say I had noticed quite really, or maybe following that I noticed. Because I don't even want to say the name of the city, I don't want to give him any attention, but in a little town near where I was living, apparently there was a naked bike rider who would cycle around the town, and the police didn't do anything about it. He was just sort of allowed to do this. And also, I've noticed where we used to walk the dogs, you would see these lone men, and as you kind of got nearer, you definitely saw more than you ever wanted to or thought you were going to, as they were lying down. And we do have a particularly beautiful, quite reactive German Shepherd who doesn't like men, and the temptation to let him off the leash or tear them under. I can't deny the temptation there. But I suppose before I really, I suppose I would have had. I feel very naive saying this, but I presume I'm not the only one. That before Sheila really made it so clear what was going on, I probably would have thought that naturism was one of these kind of fairly, wholesome pursuits. That it was about the fresh air and that feeling of freedom, and that kind of thing. I think I probably would have had that somewhere, floating around my consciousness without Sheila's analysis. So as I was saying before, I think Sheila always kind of is the first to spot these things.
A lesbian feminist movement, I don't quite call it that, but I hope so, amongst young women. The women becoming lesbians and becoming feminist lesbians in Spain, which is absolutely terrific, and that continues. And she asked if I would come and talk about what lesbian feminism is, what lesbian feminism used to be, but particularly the issue that she wanted me to address was that of biological lesbianism. Because there was one particular woman, I think, in her town, who was being very, very difficult amongst lesbians, trying to stop women becoming lesbians by saying to them, well, sometimes they say you can't become a lesbian. You're either a lesbian in the womb, or you are not, definitely. And so this particular young woman, there's others too, there's others who go around saying to him, you can't become a lesbian. If you're heterosexual, you're heterosexual. You could at the very best become bisexual, you can just become that. Or you can become a faux lesbian or a pseudo-lesbian, but certainly a second-class lesbian, because you're not a gold-class lesbian, and they're the real ones. And there's some people say you can even tell. There's one couple of lesbians I went to visit in California who told me they could tell from your voice on the phone. But there's a lot of this about, and she particularly wanted me to deal with this problem because, of course, lesbian feminists are the heart and soul of the women's liberation movement. And it's because so many hundreds of thousands of us in Europe, here in the US, became lesbians. We actually did become lesbians. We realized we actually didn't want anything to do with penises or men's pornography and so on. I was in an anti-porn group before I realized I couldn't have anything more to do with this. We'd already stopped doing the sex thing and so on. In those days we did, we said, oh, don't want to use contraception, we'll stop doing sexual intercourse. These men never even out there, keep on doing it. As having penises sticking into your body was a good thing for women in any way at all, in terms of having to do the contraception and having the sexually transmitted disease instead of being like a fly on a pin on a board, nice position for excitement, and so on. I mean, it's crazy. Sexual intercourse is crazy, but it's still going on. It's fascinating. But what I always used to say to my lovely students was, if you really need to, if you feel you are heterosexual, obviously give up sexual intercourse stuff because it's no fun anyway, and there's all kinds of technology and it's really a problem. So give up that and try to do something that's fun. But if you do that and you decide you want children, and of course someone did not now than 10, 20 years ago. But if you do want to do that, don't treat it like a sort of sacred occasion, like some candles, and say you're doing it for some good purpose, which having a baby or something. So anyway, so at that talk, obviously I said that back in the 1970s, we did not believe that sexuality at all was biological. There's nothing natural about it. And if women say there's nothing natural about the heterosexuality, I always say to them, I quote a 1950s sexologist who talked about how a couple came to him, they were very puzzled, they weren't having babies. And he found out that the man was sticking it in the belly button. Right? So I explained that we didn't think it was biological. And we actually said women could choose, and we should choose because it's a form of resistance to male domination, and it's important to choose and leave men behind. I did that. Huge numbers of others did. And as I explained at the time, when I was first told this, I was still wearing heterosexual dungarees. Can you imagine? They're kind of sort of, slightly shaped and heterosexual. They're not like I'm cheesy with that sort of thing. Yes. So that's how far back I was in 1977, heterosexual dungarees, when I actually asked the boys to move out and chose to become a lesbian. At that time, feminists generally, women generally, did not believe in biology. As gay men very often did. A lot of gay men did because they thought the only way to get rid of the persecution that they suffered was to say that it was biological. They couldn't help themselves. Just there was nothing they could do. They weren't proud of it. They just couldn't help themselves. Well, lesbians didn't want to say we are some kind of biological flaw, a biological anomaly. We said heterosexuality was the problem, and I talked about this in the talk, about heterosexuality as an institution was the problem, not lesbianism, and not necessarily gay men, although some of the ways it might be. So I think that's probably about it.
So I did mention at the beginning that I thought Sheila's work is challenging. So there we are. I hope it's not not too much of a military image to say. I think she's thrown down the gauntlet for maybe a few of the women in this room, and I would recommend you get straight onto that last section and see if you see about meeting that challenge. Anyway, before we're going to take a break, Renata, I think we'll ask you to say something about Spinifex just after the break, if that's okay. Yeah. Just after the break, because we have another very, very enjoyable task to do now. Because I mentioned that the collection Uprooting Male Dominion begins with the richly deserved Lifetime Achievement Award that was presented to Sheila in Spain. And we too, I would like to give credit here to Georgia, who actually sparked this idea, but we too thought that it would be absolutely fitting and proper to award Sheila in recognition of her, I'm tempted to say, unparalleled contribution to radical feminist scholarship, activism, and a lifetime's commitment to women. It's our absolute pleasure and honour to award you, Sheila, with a Lifetime Achievement Award.
That's absolutely fantastic. Thank you. Absolutely fantastic. Thank you very much.